Hello and welcome back to the 12 Days of Christmas. We are on day number 8, and today I'm going to be talking to you about books. For the past 12 Days of Christmas, I've shared with you books that I've read throughout that year, and I really enjoy doing this one. I don't get to talk about books on my channel that much, and I do read a good number of books throughout the year, so I enjoy sharing that with you. And my goal for this year was to read 19 books. I always try to up my goal by 1 from how many I read the previous year. So this year's goal was 19, and I'm proud to say that I definitely surpassed that. So next year's goal will be even higher, but I really do enjoy reading. I enjoy kind of the escape that a book gives you. I think it's different than anything else. While movies and TV can be nice, I think there's nothing like escaping into a good book where you can envision the scene and the characters in your own way, and you can really kind of just tune out the real world and escape into that book. Now, I'm not going to be talking to you about every single book that I've read because this video would just go on forever, but I will highlight a number of the books I read throughout this year. And I would like to know if this is something that you would like to maybe see midway through the year. But for this year, I didn't do that, so we'll have to see if you want me to do that next year. And this year, I'll just be talking about the ones I've read and enjoyed throughout the year, or at least most of them. So as I've said in other book videos, I do use Goodreads to keep track of the books I've read as well as the books that I want to read, but I also keep notes in my phone throughout the year because when I finish a book, I like to just make a little note about it because otherwise I would never remember everything about that book that I wanted to share with you. So I will be referring to those notes on my phone. And the first book that I wanted to talk about is When Life Gives You Lululemons by Lauren Weisberger. This book is in the Devil Wears Prada series. I've never read any of the Devil Wears Prada books. I have seen the movie and did really enjoy it, but never read any of the books until now. And I really enjoyed this book. It was an entertaining, light read. And because I've seen the movie, it helped me to be a little bit more familiar with some of the characters, which was helpful. There were some new characters that I wasn't familiar with, but it was still easy to follow. And I'd say it's a good beach read, and I would recommend it if you are looking for a light, fun read. It follows more of the assistant character that was played by Emily Blunt. So if you liked that character, you would probably really enjoy reading this. Also, I forgot to mention, most of the books I get from the library just because I wouldn't be able to afford buying every single book that I read. Plus, it would take up a lot of space on our bookshelf, so I only purchase ones that I think I'll want to reread or that are part of a series that I like collecting or that I cannot find at my library, which has happened. But otherwise, I get them from the library. So I'll be putting the ones I don't own with a little image up on the screen. The ones I do own, I'll hold up for you. Next is The Four Agreements, and I did find this book to be challenging at times, but I do think that it makes a lot of sense. You don't have to be religious to read this book, even though there is a lot of mentioning of God, but as long as that's not something that would bother you, you should still be able to get something out of the book, even if you are not a religious person. I personally just took the parts that I could relate to or I could relate to myself. And I could relate to all of the four agreements. I think I can also work on all of them and improve on all of them in my life. And now going back and looking at this, I realize that I haven't necessarily been doing that, so I think it would be good to refresh on them and be more conscious of them, of working them into my life or daily life. And I said in my notes here, I know it will take work. That is true, but I do think following them would improve my life as well as others. And I think it could even improve the world if enough people participated and did the four agreements for themselves. And I recommend this book to anyone, but yeah, I am going to go back and brush up on it again and try to work those into my life. The next book is All I Ever Wanted by Emily Giffin, and I do have all of her books. I just kind of started collecting them when I started reading them because I really enjoyed them. So now that I have them all, I feel like whenever she comes out with a new one, I have to get it to add to my collection. But I enjoyed this book, and it wasn't like her typical books. It wasn't about romantic relationships. It was more about parental relationships, and also touched on how having a lot of money can affect a person. It kept my interest, and I wanted to know what would happen to the characters. I enjoyed it and think you should check it out if that sounds interesting to you, or if you have liked other books from her, then I think you would enjoy it. The next one is To All the Boys I Loved Before by Jenny Han. Now, I think this would be considered a young adult book, but that doesn't bother me. I still enjoy young adult books every now and then, and I enjoyed following the main character, Lara Jean, and kind of her story, which is kind of her navigating through high school, but also relationships and that sort of thing. So I definitely enjoyed this book, and I described it in my notes as it was an easy read about young love, kept my interest, and was entertaining. Netflix did make this into a movie, and I watched that after the fact and did really enjoy it, although some of the characters were different than I pictured in my mind, which is always the case when you go from a book to a movie or a book to a TV show. But then I did, much later in the year, also read the sequel. The sequel is called P.S. I Still Love You, and I also really enjoyed this one. I found myself getting lost in it and also being able to relate to some things. It definitely kept my interest, and I'm excited for the next book and to continue Lara Jean's journey. So there is one more book in the series that I have not read, and they are currently working on making a follow-up movie which would go along with the book P.S. I Still Love You that I read. And so I'll be looking forward to watching that. Another one I read was You by Caroline Kepnes. Again, one that they made into a Netflix series. I did watch the Netflix series after reading it, but definitely liked the book more. The series kind of, I felt like, took some liberties and changed the story a little bit, and it wasn't how I remembered it, so I did prefer the book. But it is unlike any other book I've ever read. It's written from one person's perspective, but it's all of their kind of inner thoughts and monologue. And not only are they, I don't want to give spoilers. If you have not read this book and are interested in doing so, then I'll put a little time code where you can skip ahead to so that you don't have any spoiler. But they are the villain of the book, and it was suspenseful and kept my interest, but I have to be honest, some parts were disturbing, and not all the characters were particularly likable, but in spite of that, I still enjoyed reading it, I think partly because it was so different from anything else I've read. And then I usually read one James Patterson, or at least one James Patterson Alex Cross book a year. We do have, I think, all of the series, so I try to get one of those in each year. And right now, this year, I was on Mary Mary, and I do enjoy the Alex Cross series. I felt like this was a bit different from the others that I've read. It flowed nicely and kept me wanting to read more. I also enjoyed the Hollywood element that was part of it. And yeah, if you like a good, easy, quick detective story, I recommend this series to you. In this video last year, I talked about how my aunt is a published author, and this year she came out with 2 more novels that I read both of, the first of which was The Looking Glass Labyrinth, and I'll just read you a review I gave on it because I didn't make notes on these ones for some reason, but I said, I really enjoyed this book. It had so many elements to it. It was a historical fiction love story, but also included time travel. It definitely took me out of the modern world and back into the 1800s. It had elements of surprise, and I highly recommend it if you want a good book to escape into or if you enjoy love stories. It was so interesting following Rachel's journey. So it's still hard to believe that she's the one writing these books because they are so good and I really, really enjoy them. Not saying that sounds like a negative. Not saying that I don't think she could write them, but just that they are so good that it seems like it should be a New York Times best-selling author. So try to get the word out there about her books so that more people can read and enjoy them. And if you like romance or historical fiction or suspense or any of that, this would fulfill all of those for you. And while I'm on her books, I'll just talk about the other one that I read from her this year. The other one is Dark Secrets, and I'm pretty sure this is her longest one so far. I loved the Parisian aspect of this story. I also really enjoyed following Brielle's journey. It was a mix of two of my favorite genres all rolled into one, romance and mystery. Without giving anything away, there were aspects of this book that I wasn't expecting. This was definitely a story I got lost in and often found myself losing track of time while I was reading it because I was so engrossed. So again, I think it's really interesting the way that she mixes genres and has mystery and romance in one. This one took place in multiple settings between Paris and Boston, but also had, again, historical aspects that were kind of mixed in there. So really enjoyed it, and I hope that you will check out her books and enjoy them for yourself. Next up is The Favorite Sister, and for some reason I didn't write this author down, but I will do my best to link all of the books in the description box for you. And I liked this one. While there is a murder, it's not a mystery per se. It was about people who were in a reality TV show. It kept my interest, and I've wanted to find out what happened. I didn't have a favorite character because they didn't make them super likable. Again, I don't know what it is about certain books making characters not likable. You would think you'd want to like the characters, but then again, I guess it doesn't completely matter because I still read and enjoyed the book in spite of that. This year, Zoe Sugg started a book club through Instagram that she calls Zoella's Book Club, but she just does it all through her Instagram Zoella account. And the first book that I read from that book club is Little Fires Everywhere. Now, this is a book that I typically probably would not have chosen and picked up myself, but because it was in her book club and because I wanted to kind of take part in that, I did read it. I have to be honest, in the very beginning, I was a little bit lost about what was going on and kind of had to trudge through those first few chapters before I really got into it. But as I got into it more, I got invested in the characters and wanted to know what would happen to them. It definitely kept my interest, as all of these books have. That's why I'm talking about them. I really enjoyed it, but it also left me wanting more. I still wanted to know more about what happened to the characters, especially Mia Pearl and Lexi. Then I read Eligible by Curtis Sittenfeld. Again, one that I really enjoyed. It's a romance and touted as a modern telling of Pride and Prejudice. I really enjoyed getting to know the characters and seeing how their lives unfolded. I was really hoping for a certain outcome, but I don't want to spoil it, so I won't say what. Just go and read if you like romances. Another one, so I kind of, if you haven't noticed, go back and forth between fiction and nonfiction, and a lot of the nonfiction I read is self-help, motivational, those sorts of things. So the next one I read is Difficult Conversations. And I did find this book to be a little bit difficult. I had trouble focusing on it at times and felt I had to be focused in order to retain the information. So it may be one of those books that you have to read over and over again a few times to really grasp it. I did find some of the communication tips that they gave helpful. With these types of books, I find it's one thing to read it and a whole other thing to implement the tips that they're giving you. So it takes work, and I will be working on it. But sometimes I feel like these books you have to own to be able to go back and reread and really grasp it. But sometimes I just want to move on to a new book, so I haven't really done that. This was, I think, recommended, or this person definitely was recommended by Zoe because she had her on her Takeover Tuesday. and it is fern cotton, and I think when I read the description of this book, it sounded really interesting, sounded like one that I probably would want to reread and have a copy of. Plus, I think it wasn't available at the library, so that's another reason why I got it. But it is happy, finding joy in every day, and letting go of perfect. And it gives some great suggestions and tools on how to be happier in everyday life. Some of the stuff I've heard before, some of it was a good reminder. This is a good book. Oh, here I said, this is a good book to own because she puts a lot of exercises in it that you can try out. And I didn't do any of the exercises the first time going through it, but maybe at some point I will go back through and do those exercises. But as I had said, this is a perfect example of one of those books that you can go back to over and over again. This was another Zoella Book Club book, but also one that I had already had on my want to read list, and that is The 7.5 Deaths of Evelyn Hardcastle by Stuart Turton. And I think it was one of my favorite books for the whole year. It's a mystery. While it is one of the longer books I read it in almost the least amount of time. So it was longer than most of the books, but it took me less time than most of the books to read it. That's how much I liked it and was interested in it. So it's unlike any other mystery that I've ever read, and it continues to keep you guessing and is one that I highly recommend, but especially for you mystery lovers. This next book is from a YouTuber that I've talked about here on my channel, who is also a published author, and she has a number of books, but recently started writing a series. So I haven't read some of her older books. I just started out with her series, and the first in the series is called The Six, and I guess it's about 6 different friends. But the first one in the series is Christie, and it's by Samantha March. And all of the books are titled with a female's name. I believe she just, well, as of the recording of this video, she has 3 completed. So I still have the other 2 to read. But this was again one that I had to purchase because my library does not carry it. But it's also nice to be able to support her since I do really enjoy her content. So this is a light, fun, quick read. I really enjoyed reading about all of the female friendships. And we'll be honest that at times I felt slightly envious of their relationships and how close they were. I enjoyed following Christie's journey and her relationship with Gray. I recommend it if you are looking for something that's a fast read and also entertaining. Back to the self-help motivational books. I did have this one on my to-read list, but I also had a friend recommend that I read it, so I went and got it from the library shortly after that. It's Girl Wash Your Face by Rachel Hollis, and I really enjoyed it. I read it at a time that I really needed it, and Rachel touched on many things that I could relate to. I'm excited to read her next book, Girl Stop Apologizing, and I hope to implement many of the things that she talks about in this book. Next up is The 4 Tendencies by Gretchen Rubin. I heard a number of people talk about this book, plus I started listening to Gretchen's podcast where she touches on these things, so I decided to go out and get the book and read it. I enjoyed it. I saw very clearly which tendencies I fall within. I found the concept at times to be a bit rigid, but I did resonate with a lot of the things that the book said and how it explains people's behaviors and why they do certain things. Another Zoella Book Club pick that I probably would not necessarily have read or chosen on my own. I believe it's also a Reese's Book Club pick, but it is Where the Crawdads Sing by Delia Owens, and I can tell you, at least at the time that I got it, it was a very popular one because my library had a wait list for it, and you could not renew it and had to return it on time because the wait list was just ongoing, and that was with them having 2 copies. But I wasn't too sure about it at first. It definitely started out a little slow and confusing for me, but after getting through that initial little bit, it picked up and I really enjoyed it. Again, not one I typically would have chosen for myself, but I am glad that I did. And the final book that I'm going to talk about today is another mystery, and it is by Ruth Ware. I've talked about some of her other books in my other videos. I really enjoy her books, and this one was no exception. It's The Turn of the Key. It's a great mystery that had lots of twists and surprises, and really surprised me, and honestly made me a little bit sad. But that's all I'll say because I don't want to give anything away. But I was also slightly frustrated with this book because it definitely left me wanting more. It ended and I didn't feel satisfied. I wanted to know more about the characters, what was going to happen to them, that sort of stuff. So that's the only con I might have had about it, but a really great mystery. I recommend her books to you, but especially you could check this one out if you like mysteries. So those are just some of the books that I read in 2019. I hope that you enjoyed hearing about them, and let me know some of your favorite books that you read this year down in the comments, because I'm always looking for new suggestions and recommendations. Also, let me know how you feel about me doing that video midway through the year. Have you read any of these books, and did you enjoy them like I did? I would love to know that as well. But thank you for watching, and I will talk to you very soon in another video. Bye!